Welcome back. Today, I want to talk about the Star Trek Next Generation films. So, I just finished a rewatch of the entire. I just finished a rewatch of the entire Next Generation series, all 7 seasons. I'll post those links in the description box below. And I figured I wanted to keep going with the story, and so I watched Generations, First Contact, Insurrection, and Nemesis. So overall, I think if I'm going to rank them for my personal ranking, I still like Generations the most, then First Contact, and then Insurrection and Nemesis to me are together. Like they're both kind of at the bottom of the barrel. So Generations, it's a wonky movie, but I think the first 2/3 really works until Picard goes into the Nexus. It's a really good movie. It's really the first 2/3 of Generations, I think, is the best next gen film to date. Like, obviously, we have the wonderful prologue with Scotty, Chekhov, and Kirk on the Enterprise B. Beautifully written prologue, very heartrending when Kirk is gone. We meet Sulu's daughter. The whole thing is really done really well, where there's that moment that Kirk wants to sit in the chair when the captain of the Enterprise B is going to go down below decks to take care of something. Kirk looks at the chair, and then he's like, no, your place is on the bridge. I'll take care of it. And he goes and closes the door. I'll be right back, Scotty. Shuts the door. So it was a tough. I teared up when they come to, after the crisis is over, and they both come to the deck, and they see it's open to space. And Chekhov is like, was anybody in here? And Scotty goes, and it's Kirk. And then the storyline for Next Gen is great. I mean, it starts off, it's a lot of wonkiness to it. Like, Data's emotion ship happens, and they rescue Soren and the other Elorians from the Lakul. So they're aboard, and this whole Nexus ribbon thing and the mysterious, Soren, who is he? And Guinan knows him and all that. Really great. And then the Duras sisters can make an appearance. And this whole subplot where they, and great humor, actually, great humor through Generations, where they're waiting for Geordi to go to engineering because they can see through his visor, and how they now can modulate their weapons to go through the shields. That was awesome. Really cool. I love the scene when also that Picard and Data are in stellar cartography, and they have to figure out what Soren is doing by collapsing stars, and they figure out the gravitational waves and where it's going. I love that scene. And then there's some character moments. Like, first of all, the two big character moments, and for the most part in the movies, the only character stuff that happens really is Data and Picard. So the limitation of the Next Gen movies really is the side characters really do take a back seat. They're not really involved in anything because I guess of the nature of, 2-hour storytelling in a motion picture. Like, you can only do so much. So unfortunately, all the other characters really take a back seat, and it's kind of Picard and Data for the most part. So Data has to deal with the death of Renee and his brother and the fire, and he's crying like some. I love the scenes. There's so weird scenes when he's crying and his Picard is crying and his shoulders are shaking. Like, it wasn't a cool movie cry. It was a very messy, like, awkward movie cry. Like, I give him full marks for it. Like, it was an amazing scene and very touching as well. And of course, Data has to deal with the fact that now the emotion chip is fused to his neural net, and he has to now deal with feelings, which he never did before. And so there's some great scenes there. But once you go into the Nexus, it's over. It doesn't make any sense from then on. It's really, unfortunately, I mean, I guess the writers had an impossible task. How do we start a movie with Kirk and company and end it with the Next Generation? Ideally, putting the two captains together, at least for a brief scene or two. I can't imagine the ideas that they had to come up with. And this is the best they came up with. So, and the ribbon idea is really cool. It's good Trek to me, like, because it's psychological. So it isn't like some world-ending, Death Star. It's like, it's your heart's desire. It's being almost like heroin. It's almost like stellar heroin. You can just get back to it. You'll be living in a paradise, an Eden, if you will. But there's way too many problems. Like, why is an Echo of Guinan still in there and she's out? And now there'll always be an Echo of Kirk in there and Picard in there. And then when Picard decides, he's told you can leave the Nexus whenever you want. You can go to any time period. And I'm thinking, okay, so go back to when you rescued Soren from the Lakul. Put him in the brig. You're good to go. Like, you're done. And have Kirk come with you. And now Kirk's back. He's alive. And, he can go back to whatever time period he wants. Like, it's impossible. When you create that possibility of, like, you can leave the Nexus at any time period, whenever, wherever you want. I can't imagine there was an audience member anywhere in any theater in the world that was sort of like, but wait, why did you go back 5 minutes before the bad guy was about to execute his evil plan and still have all these problems? Like, what? Because you got beat in a fist fight on a catwalk, you brought back Kirk on the catwalk so he could beat. It's just the whole thing. Like, don't get me started. So it kind of, the finale really, once they go into the Nexus, the movie kind of collapses. But I still, there's so much good in it that it's still my favorite one. First Contact was okay. I think First Contact is like The Voyage Home in a way. It's a crowd pleaser. Everybody loves First Contact, and I find it okay. Like, I'm never blown away by it. I think the idea is interesting that they want to go back to First Contact. When the warp drive was created in the first flight, and the Borg get on the ship. There's just something about all of that I don't know. It's more like an action movie. I mean, they try to do some stuff with Data where he's given flesh, but they really don't spend much time on it. And it's almost like when Lore gives him emotions back in one of the episodes. I think it was Descent. Lore's kind of projecting emotions into Data. And because now he's all emotional, he's kind of going to do Lore's bidding. It's kind of a retread of that. Like, now the Borg Queen has given him skin and he can feel. And it's like, now, he's going to be her slave. They don't do much with it, and he comes out of it very quickly. So it's given very short shrift. And the Picard story is, him coming to terms with his time with the Borg, obviously. Because we never really dealt with that. Once Best of Both Worlds happened, like, we never really went back to the Borg. Frankly, there weren't a lot of Borg episodes. Really, Voyager was the Borg show. For the most part, there were very little. Though the Borg was introduced in Next Gen, there were very little episodes. I think they couldn't afford the special effects. But so you never dealt with the aftermath, except I think the episode when Picard went home after Best of Both Worlds, and him and his brother are at it, and he breaks down crying, and he admits that, like, I was powerless. I was behind this body, and it was killing thousands of Federation lives. Now he wants revenge, right? So I get it. Like, it's kind of a solid plot point, but, and there's something about the woman from Earth who's on board with him. She's the one who's going to kind of help him, right? I mean, she's she woke up that morning not knowing that they were even aliens. And now all of a sudden she's learned that, the Enterprise is there. There's a race called the Borg. They've come from the future. The Borg are on the ship. Like, she's running around with Picard, and all of a sudden now she's his conscience. And I was just like, it's something that never really rung true about that. Him not wanting to abandon the ship made sense to me. But her being the voice of conscience was just like, she was just stuck in there. It should have been someone from the Enterprise. It should have been Beverly or somebody else doing it, not just some random character. So I don't know, something about that didn't ring true. And then there's the sequence when the Borg are trying to set up this antenna on the ship. That was okay. That was kind of a fun sequence. And a lot of the comedy down on the planet, to me, just didn't ring true. Troy really had nothing to do. And Troy and Beverly really were like C characters in this. It was really like, on the planet, it was James Cromwell, Geordi, and Riker. Kind of had most of the story. And in the Enterprise, basically, it's Data and Picard, so it was okay. I mean, I'm not really over the moon about the Next Gen movies, frankly. Especially the next one, Insurrection. So Insurrection, to me, in a sense, Generations was about Picard, is he going to survive? And about Kirk. So it had stakes in that, if they don't win the day, the Enterprise gets destroyed because the star gets blown up. So, it was for all the marbles in a way. And in First Contact, obviously, the human race is at stake, right? They went for the big deal. That if they don't win this, the Borg are going to take over the planet back in the day, and there'll never be a Federation. But Insurrection, it's like the Federation is at some. They're trying to, do some deal. They're trying to relocate some people so they can gather these particles, which make people young again. It felt very much like an episode. There was really nothing at stake for the crew. They tried to make it something where at some point Picard kind of goes rogue and he says, if this is the Starfleet that I'm a part of, we're done. If Starfleet is behind relocating these people against their will, and blowing up these rings to get these particles, we're out. So I get it. It was kind of like, they went on the planet to kind of, they went native and they were the rebellion. But I don't know. Nothing really, there wasn't much at stake. And for Picard, he got into this sort of relationship with this Donna Murphy character. Okay, you knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. He wasn't going to stay. And Data, there were problems with Data in the beginning of the episode, but once that was done, he was back on board. There were really no, and the fact that the crew was getting younger, you were bringing Troy and Riker together a little more. Like that, they're setting up the marriage in Nemesis by bringing them two together, making them more youthful. The Riker's feeling his oats, so he's making you play for her again. But really, the whole youthful thing, they didn't do much with it. Them being on the planet and all these battles with they're firing at the drones. Like, it's just like, the more they try to make Trek like an action movie, the less I like it. The more they try to make it like Star Wars, the less I like it. And yeah, it would have made an interesting episode, I think. But as a motion picture, to me, it was just very low stakes. And then we have Nemesis, which purports to kind of end the arc of Next Gen. And, again, they tried to do a two-hander, right? They find B4. So now this is Data confronting his past, confronting what Dr. Soong made, possibly a brother. Him dealing with that. And at the same time, Picard is dealing with a younger version of himself in, Shinzon. But there's not much to it. Again, Data's not really given much to work with before. So I didn't really understand I think it was very perfunctory. Like, well, Picard confronts his younger self and Data does too. But the confrontation between Data and B4 is very much, he's a very limited being. There's not much he can do. And Data winds up shutting him down after a while. So that's kind of done. And then Shinzon's not very interesting. Tom Hardy's great, and he does the best as he can with what he's given. But again, like they did in the last season of Next Gen, there's Remans now, and now the Remans have taken over Romulus. It's like they're kind of retconning a new part of the Star Trek world that we haven't heard before. It's clever, but this Reman Viceroy is like Troy, and then these weird scenes where, Tom Hardy projects himself through this Viceroy to kind of mind rape Troy. Like, for why? Like, okay, he wants to he needs to eclipse Picard biologically. They make the plot, go along with the theme, right? He needs Picard's body to infuse him with life so that he can live on and eclipse Picard. And that's what he wants to do too. He feels like, I'm more than you. I'm going to eclipse you. I was kind of cast off and I'm going to be better than you and all this kind of stuff. It's kind of a dull thing. I don't know. To me, there wasn't much to it. And it was nice to see Riker and Troy tie the knot. Data singing at the wedding was really weird. I don't know. It's just, and the humor in this one didn't quite come off. The beginning when Picard's in that Jeep on the planet when they find B4, it just seemed goofy. The glasses on. I don't know. It was really weird. And then, they did very much a Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3 thing where I think if Nemesis had done well, the data being downloaded into B4 The next movie would have been them figuring out how to now release Data's memories into B4's consciousness, and it would have overwritten him, and Data would have been back, and Geordi would have worked some magic, and they would have rewritten some of his positronic brain, and it would have been Data again, and you would have had him for the next. Just the way Spock's consciousness was given to McCoy, Data's was given to B4, right? But they didn't do that actually. And once you get to Picard, you realize that the way they dealt with that was that it never worked, and Data's consciousness was not able to come back into that body. But yeah, so he sacrifices himself, which is touching. It was a touching moment when he beams Picard off the scimitar and obviously has to blow the thing up. This Thaleron radiation is kind of the Genesis device in Star Trek 2. A lot of Star Trek 2 kind of parallels, I think, with Nemesis. But it's a very boring, dull movie. The Enterprise goes to Romulus and Remus and stays there for most of the movie, and then kind of leaves and is chased by the scimitar, and they go into a cloud, which is kind of what they did in Star Trek 2. And, that's that. And so there's really not much going on. It's a lot of scenes in the throne room, a lot of talking scenes. So it's a very kind of plotting movie for a while until finally the action starts and there's a little bit of a space battle. The ramming scene is very cool. The Picard's going to be more butch than his younger self, and he's going to ram the ship, whatever. But and the ending was very, they did a little bit of trying to wrap up now, where Troy and Riker are going to head off to the Titan. And Data's obviously gone, so they're celebrating him. And for the rest of them, though, or I think Beverly's going somewhere too. I think Beverly is gonna captain a ship somewhere. But the last thing is them really with some wine glasses, talking about Data, and then Picard's like, "What was that song that he whispered? I wish I could remember." And you cut away, and I just felt it was just they didn't quite do it. Like it just felt odd. It felt like. I mean, when Spock died, it was just a wonderful, because the theme of the movie was rebirth. And Kirk felt young again, and Spock had sacrificed himself for Kirk, and it invigorated him. And there was something right about all that made it very satisfying. But Data's sacrifice here, it was beautiful in a way, but I don't know, everything fell flat in this movie for me. And it was a bummer of an ending, because it was finished for there. So that's my feeling. Very mixed reviews. I think for the most part, the original series movies were much better. I enjoyed the first movie, frankly. I loved Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan, obviously. 3 was a dud. 4 was really funny and wonderful. 5 was a dud, and 6 was very good. I think their batting average is a little higher, whereas I really liked 2/3 of Generations, and then it was really kind of a slow diminish down. I acknowledge that First Contact is pretty good, but the last 2 were not so great. So I'm contemplating Picard just to kind of finish off the next gen storyline. Season 3 is so good, but to have to watch the first 2 seasons, I mean, I'm already 2 episodes into the first season, and it is so bad. It's so badly written. I don't know if I want to waste 6 more hours of my time and then another 8 hours on the second season before I get to the third season. So I'm contemplating, but it's not, I don't know if I'm going to do it. But anyway, those are my thoughts on the next gen movies. Thanks for watching.